I'm Richard Harmon, the chair. Will the other committee members state their appearance?
Elaine Schwartz.
Karen Hiller.
Okay, the first order of business is selection of members to the Historic Tourism Committee. Apparently, before the committee are, we need to approve two nominees, one from Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area and Topeka Tourism Alliance. Doug Wallace's name has been advanced to be the nominee or the appointee from Freedom's Frontier, and Betty Allen on behalf of the Topeka Tourism Alliance. What's the committee's recommendation?
I'll move we accept the proposed candidate.
Is there a second?
I am not going to be able to second that, at least without whole discussion.
Go ahead.
Thinking that we had, because of the questions about the nominees last time, I followed up on both. I'm satisfied with the process that the Tourism Alliance went through. I am concerned about, I know why this ordinance was changed and the representation on the committee was restructured. I can be okay with having Doug serve. I called Bill Wagnon just because his name was put forth before, and Bill had not been contacted, he said, but he said he would be willing to serve. We talked a little bit. One of the things I'd like is that the Ritchie House has been through this process, has been funded before, and has done other fundraising, but at this point is not expecting to be an applicant for funds. And there's been some push-pull about the Constitution Hall as it's come along, and it seemed like perhaps having Bill would be a more neutral choice. At the same time, I understand that I think the intention of having someone from Freedom Frontier was to have people who are actively running historic sites. So I get that.
Well, I will second the motion. Elaine, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we appoint Doug Wallace and Betty Allen to the Historic Tourism Committee. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item before the committee is 2014 budget for Transient Guest Tax Fund, presentation by agencies regarding their budget requests. I know there are several conferees who wish to be heard. Whoever wishes to be first, step forward, please. It makes no difference to the committee.
Take the first shot at this. My name is Bill Michaud. I am the immediate past board chair of Visit Topeka, and here tonight to discuss the Visit Topeka request for our transient guest tax for our budget next year. Transient guest tax is our primary source of funding. We do have a small amount of non-tax generated income, but this is the lion's share of our budget, and basically this is what we do. I think the committee is fully aware that the current transient guest tax rate is 7% in the city. In real dollars, that means for every $80 room that's sold in Topeka, $5.60 goes into the transient guest tax fund. And dollars show up in this fund only when we put heads on beds and only when there are visitors in our city. There isn't any other source of income for this fund other than when there are heads on beds in Topeka. This year's budget's a little bit different because we have Sunflower Soccer taking 1% of the, it's not the same. We also have Great Overland Station and Historic Asset Preservation taking another cent. So out of that 7 cents, we really are talking about a fund of 5% of that $80. So if the budget is using $2,450,000, if you include the Sunflower Soccer portion of that, then that means in Topeka we have to sell 437,500 guest rooms in the city to meet this budget each year. The sales tax generated just from the hotel stays, if we sell 437,500 room nights, The sales tax that goes to, that some portion would go into the general fund would be $3,132,500 that would go into the general fund. And I bring that up because when we talk about transient guest tax as an economic development through tourism, we're not just talking about money into the sales in the transient guest tax pot. We're also talking about money that's going into the general fund through sales tax collections. That $3,132,500 is just the sales tax that would be generated on the hotel stays, not the sales tax generated at the gas stations, the restaurants, and the retail. So if you use the flow-through effect of the, the economic multiplier, the calculator using, if every guest spends, when they show up in Topeka, $100 per night, then the economic impact of Visit Topeka and the partners and the heads on beds that we produce every year is $63 million. So talking about a significant amount of a contributing factor to the local economy. Of the 5% that we talked about a second ago, Visit Topeka is requesting its budget of $1,050,000. That number was generated through calculating 3% out of the 7% collected. We're trying to get ourselves in this this figure that we can count on every year, being allocated 3% out of the 6% collected. With the dollar, last year our budget was $1,070,000, and with that budget, we participated with the hotel partners and through the efforts of the staff in 64,394 directly accounted booked room nights that we had contracts on. Business went definite for this year and for future years, almost 65, and tracked through our 295,681 attendees at events that we provided marketing support or staff support or some level of participation by the Bureau. So 300,000 people bringing their money into town, spending money out at events and things that we participated in. Out of that 64, during the course of the year, we attracted 88 new events, 88 events that weren't in Topeka last year that we went out and we got definite contracts on and are going to be bringing to the community in future. And that's been the pattern. Every year we track ourselves on existing events that are repeat and new events that are bringing additional money into the city. And last year we hit 88. So for this year's budget, out of the $1,050,000 that we've requested, we are spending that money. 46% of that is going to salaries. We're a sales-based organization. We do what we do by boots on the ground, by going out and recruiting business, finding business, and bringing it to Topeka. Only 14% of our budget goes to operations, roughly $138,000. So paying the rent, buying the office supplies is only 14% of our budget. And then advertising and publications and the visitors guides that we publish, direct sales and marketing is 41% of our budget, or $427,000. So that's how our budget was spent. And I think that what that says is, with the new events that we created, that we helped bring to town last year, with the economic impact of what we've done, I think that shows we've responsibly utilized our funds that have been provided to us, and put heads on beds to replenish those funds. The second part of our budget request is the renewal of the bid fund. This is a fund that is in its second. 2014 will be the third year of the utilization of the bid fund, and so it's a fund that's very much in its infancy. These are funds that basically are utilized to compete in the convention market, to bring events here. There are other cities that have straight bid dollars that they put on the table to attract conventions, and by having this fund, it's allowed us to play in that sandbox with the other competitive communities. A couple of the success stories that we have with the bid fund is the Tough Mudder event that's expected to bring 10,000 to 12,000 people. 4,000 registrants will be coming to Topeka in late September. I think everybody read the news articles a couple of months ago where we were awarded the NAIA National Wrestling Championship. That was a function. We would not have been able to do that without the bid fund. We've also retained the Sunflower State Games on a long-term contract, as well as the Kansas Kids Wrestling event on a 5-year deal. All of those things would not have been possible if we didn't have those bid dollars. So this is a a lot of success stories that are coming out of the bid fund. The only drawback that we found with the bid fund is the uncertainty of knowing whether or not that was going to continue to be funded on an annual basis. These funds are committed for conventions and events in 2015, 2016, 2017 as planners plan their events. So we have this fund balance that we've already committed everything to, even though the money sits in the account. We have to hold that money in case there isn't funding for the bid fund in future years. So the reason that the bid fund request went from from 150,000 to 175,000, 175 is again 0.5% out of the 7% collected. So we're using 3% for the Bureau, 0.5% for the bid fund, and ultimately what's in $5,000 worth of difference of last year's budget. So we think we can continue to have more successes with the bid fund if we have that, if we get that established as an annual funding level. In conclusion, it wouldn't be consistent with the purpose without addressing the proposed transfer of transient guest tax funds to the general fund. This year, $350,000, if you include the wayfinding signs, has been recommended or asked for or requested to go to the general fund. And that is about 10% of the overall money from the room, overall 10% of the room nights sold in Topeka would go to transfer the general fund. And from that transfer, there would not be any heads on beds created from that transfer. No reinvestment of the money, no sales tax flow through from the economic impact of that investment. So as we do every year, we would request you consider reducing the general fund transfer, reducing or eliminating the general fund transfer so that we continue to do the work, good work that we've been doing with the transient guest tax fund. Thank you for your time. I hope that all this makes sense. I haven't gone through too many numbers, and if you have any questions, I'd certainly be glad to answer them.
Any questions of the committee?
Bill, you had indicated that the economic impact would be $63 million on Visit Topeka. Do you have any kind of an idea of what the economic impact of the bid fund would be, or would that be in that $63 million?
That would be in that $63 million. That $63 million is a number for 2012 based upon the actual business that came through the market. So the bid fund is in the future when those events come through the city and we have actual attendances and actual room nights pick up, then we'd be able to calculate the economic impact on an event by event basis.
And that $63 million is a number that can be proved from the nights of bed stays and all that.
Yeah, I think the calculator that they use is when a visitor comes to town, they'll on average spend about $100. So we kind of take that and extrapolate through the market and utilize that number to come up with that $63 million.
Which brings in more sales tax.
Correct.
Do you have any questions, Karen? Go ahead.
I do. I've talked to Bill a little bit since the last meeting, and I was very concerned about the comments that got made last time about the wayfinding signs. Not so much about the source of funds for them, but more that they weren't significant, which is how I took those comments. And it forced me to do a little homework that I really feel like I need to share. First, though, I'm really a supporter of promoting tourism and visitors to Topeka. And I'm further supportive of having the 3% for whatever entity does that for us and 0.5% in the bid fund. My concern is that what I heard you talk about today was all sales and conferences and sports events. It was event marketing, but it was not about tourism. And we've been talking steadily for some years. If you could react, please, about what you see the role of Visit Topeka in tourism in Topeka and Visit Topeka's activity.
In the budget, the $427,700 was for marketing, sales and marketing expenditures going to trade shows for buses and promoting along with the Kansas. There's a coalition at the state level of I-70. tourism. I mean, I think that it's inherent in what we do. Tourism is bringing people to Topeka, and that's in everything that we do. The comments, the issues on the signs are really just that, signs are, and I think last week when I made the comments, I qualified that, and I think it would be a great thing. It would improve our city. It would be a service to our visitors, but it would not produce any heads on beds. And so therefore, because the transient guest tax dollars are, by their purpose, by their nature, intended for marketing of the city and to increase visitors to our city so that the fund perpetuates, that's where I was, that's where those comments were based on last year, or last week. Tourism is something. I mean, if you, the marketing we do, is regional. We try to bring people to Topeka. It's just, one of the biggest things that we do is direct sales, and that results in tourism, whether you call it convention or sports or day trips. We do, a ton of organizations for day trips, bus tours, and market our attractions with our visitors guide and such things.
My colleagues may not agree with me, but I feel strongly that if you're not doing if we're bringing people to Topeka, but we are not getting them to all of our facilities, our restaurants, our entertainment, our regular events such as First Fridays and so on, our special events, by using our website, by doing advanced direct marketing to the people who are coming to those very events that we've landed, then we're not getting the bang for the buck that I think people expected us to get out of the visitor dollars. One of the things I did just to see what you all were saying was I went back and I pulled up on your website your 2011 annual report. Mm-hmm. And it describes the mission as dedicated to improving the area economy through marketing the region as an exceptional destination for meetings, events, and tourism. Visit Topeka is committed to advocating for community development that will not only attract more visitors, but will also enhance the community's quality of life. And that's what I thought the mission was. I had just gotten your first quarter report from 2013, and that report says the mission is to grow the transient guest tax by attracting visitors, meetings, conventions, sports, and events to Topeka, thereby enriching the community. I would say that that's a much more limited statement, and I am concerned about us falling back. We've worked a lot on getting Visit Topeka more involved. I have, but a lot of people have, and so I am concerned. I looked at the advertising information that Visit Topeka is putting out right now for hiring a new executive director, and it was pretty much totally focused on sales of conventions and not about tourism. It said it was kind of tangential to be involved in that, but not to lead it and not to make that a priority. And the other thing I thought back to was going to the League of Kansas Municipalities meeting in the fall, and Visit Topeka wasn't there. I got the package and there was nothing about Topeka in there, and those folks all came early to be in Topeka. Again, I support the funding set aside, but I am very interested in a proviso that would go out from this committee or the council about what kinds of services we want to see with the next round of funding to make sure that tourism is included and promoting our local businesses and our regular events as well.
Any other questions of Mr. I was going to say Mr. Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Bill.
Mr. Do
If
you have
I
any
can
questions,
say,
Elaine?
Can I have a question?
Please.
Thank you. And I apologize for arriving late. On the bid fund, do you have, if, like you say, you're asking for an increase in that, to what extent is it totally used, or is there more demand, or if you had more available? Because that really brings specific, whether it's events, conventions, et cetera, to the city.
There certainly is more demand. If there was more monies available, we could get more aggressive going after larger events, as we have been in the Tough Mudder and those things. The thing about the bid fund is, for example, the Sunflower State Games was $20,000 a year, and we got a 3-year commitment. So we had to set aside $60,000 out of last year's $150,000 in order to be able to honor that commitment for the next 3 years. And Kansas Kids Wrestling was about 17 or 20,000 for 5 years. So as you make those commitments and you have to reserve those funds, then you have to wait until the next round of allocations before you can go after additional things, because you've already escrowed all those funds for future years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions of this conferee? Seeing
If I can make one more comment. You guys are great. And so I have those concerns. We've shared them privately. I felt strongly enough about it. I wanted to share it here, but don't take it at all personally, and I think it all can be done. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Kurt Young, did you want to follow Bill?
Thank you. Kurt Young. I'm representing the Topeka Lodging Association tonight. And Bill has done a very good job of summarizing all of the facts and figures and the percentages and the numbers. So I'm going to avoid any redundancy as much as I can. One of the things I'd like to point out is that over the last several years, the Lodging Association and Visit Topeka, we've all worked very carefully and very hard to be consistent in our message and consistent in our goals and what we want to accomplish with the use of the transient guest tax dollars. So with that in mind, a lot of what I say here tonight is not going to be any different than the message I've carried to you in previous years when I've been before you when it comes budget time. And that message is one of consistency. We've done a good job over the last several years of getting to the point, we're not there yet, not 100%, so we still have a challenge in front of us, but we've done a good job of getting to the point where the transient guest tax dollars have been used and allocated in areas and in venues, events or whatever, that specifically put heads on the bed, okay? And that's a term that is unique to the lodging industry. It's unique to the whole discussion of transient guest tax dollars. So my message tonight is no different than it has been in previous years. We want to drive home to you as a committee and to the council as a whole that we need to continue to look at the availability, that fund of transient guest tax dollars as an investment fund, no different than any other investment fund that any of you have personally or corporately in your business. And if we don't continue to put our focus on utilizing those dollars on events that will ultimately put a head in the bed someplace in Topeka, then we're not being judicious about the use of those monies. Bill mentioned that of the 7% that's collected currently within the city, that 1% goes to Sunflower Soccer for the improvements at the soccer field. That was a joint effort from the Topeka Lodging Association, Visit Topeka, and a lot of different parties involved in getting that accomplished. We have currently 1% that's going to the Great Overland Station and historic preservation, so that leaves 5%. An easy way to just come up with a number that you can relate to and you can't forget is that for every $100,000 we take out of the transient guest tax fund to use for a non-revenue producing event translates to 25,000 rooms that we in the industry have to sell to, that's not going to generate any money to replace that $100,000. I think Bill mentioned that we sold about 588,000 rooms last year. Well, for every $100,000 you take out and use someplace that's not going to replenish that money, that's 25,000 rooms out of that total that aren't going to generate any transient guest tax dollars. The message we've been bringing to you every year is to look at the use of the transient guest tax dollars as your investment fund and reap the rewards on the sales tax side. Because there is a very distinct correlation between the transient guest tax dollars and the sales tax revenue that's generated as a result of putting a head in the bed. If we're taking that money and using it in a non-revenue replacement manner, we're not only losing the transient guest tax dollars, we're also losing the corresponding sales tax revenue that would be generated as a result of that stay. So I know last year, as I stood here, I came to you and we actually, I think, if memory serves me correctly, talked about some of the requests, the individual requests that were before us at that time. My message this year, in light of the number of requests that are there, I would ask that you look at these requests through the prism of, is this request, is this event, whatever it may be, going to put heads on the bed someplace in a hotel in Topeka? Is that self-serving? I don't think so. Is it serving a purpose for the community? Absolutely. I think we finished up the year last year, and I think it was about 58% occupancy citywide in all of our hotels. That's, I hesitate to say a disgraceful number, but it is certainly not, in the industry, is certainly not a good number to be at in terms of occupancy. So anytime we're robbing funds, we have the potential of not only we're certainly at the very least not going to do anything to improve that number, but we also have the potential of hurting and making things even worse. So my message to you tonight is to look at these requests for transient guest tax dollars through the prism of whether or not it's going to generate heads on the bed.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Any questions? Elaine?
Thank you. Kurt, can you, as the newbie, the new kid on the block here, up here, can you give me a little history? Give me a little history of, when you say new requests, what's the historical requests? What have they been, and what are new requests now that you consider are new requests that may put that issue of heads on the bed?
Well, there is a very historical answer to that question. We, several years ago, had a process in place. Some of you will remember, I don't want to dwell a lot on it, but it was a tourism development fund. And that's really what got us to the point of having a bid fund within Visit Topeka. But in recent past years, the requests have been pretty much from Heartland Park, the Expo Center, help me out, Visit Topeka, obviously. Those have been the primary three requests, and then the city has always taken a share to go to the city general fund. And I would say the same thing about that allocation, that I would say you've got to look at that through whether or not that's going to generate any heads on the bed. New requests, obviously the wayfinding signs is something new that has not been there before. I believe we have a request, and I'm not saying anything about the value of these events or the venue that they represent, because they may all be good events, but we really need to look at the end result at the end of the day as to whether or not it's going to put heads on the bed, so we can sit here this time next year and have a bigger number to work with. So maybe sometime in the future we have more funds to allocate, and maybe we can be a little bit more generous. But when we're talking about a very, it's a small number to budget from. And until we grow it, we really can't think beyond the point of putting heads on the bed. I kind of tap danced around your question a little bit, but
Thank you.
Any other questions of this conferee? Karen?
go
Well,
ahead, Karen.
As a representative official, as well as someone who's been involved in the arts and economic development, has been a conference goer and traveler all over the country to conference hotels, kind of conventions that you're trying to attract, as well as having been a soccer and a baseball mom and gone to those tournaments that we are working successfully to attract. I would put forth that the tourism part is critical to spending the same amount of money and having more heads on beds. In that, if I know what's available in Topeka to do, I am more likely to come early or stay late or bring my spouse or bring my family. And I think we've been missing that. And you can see it all over the place in what has not been done, things that have been done but have not been done, as well as, again, I am very concerned about the advertising, what is in the advertising for the new CEO, because if we want to promote what we have here in Topeka and the emerging kinds of things, people want to be outdoors now. They want to shop local. They want to buy local. That is not reflected at all in what we are recruiting to Topeka. And we, in order to deliver what those convention goers want, I'm used to getting something in advance of a conference from the city and from the Visitors Bureau that says, we're so glad your conference is coming here and we want you to know that we have First Fridays, you should come early and stay late. We don't do that. And so we have set the hook with the convention business, but we have not reeled it in terms of filling out those goals that people have worked so hard on in this community to make it richer and more attractive to people who live here as well as tourists. And I'm not the scholar in it, but I know that that's what creates heads on beds. It keeps the people decide to stay overnight in Topeka instead of driving home to Johnson County, for instance. And so
Absolutely, and I'm going to speak more from an industry perspective here. You know, we just finished NHRA weekend, okay? I take great, and this is kind of on a personal level, okay, and my property. If I can get the racers that come to spend the weekend with Ray and the guests that come to, the fans that come to watch, typically they come in on Thursday or Friday or Saturday, but they're gone on Sunday. My goal and my staff's goal is to get as many of those people to stay Sunday night and leave on Monday. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
it is.
Because we look for things for them to do on Sunday afternoon or Monday afternoon, Monday morning. And so there is a lot of that goes on. I'm going to stand here and be so bold as to say I'm not the only person in town in the hotel industry that's doing that. I think it's done universally through all of the hotels, because anybody at the hotel level who's in the business of sales has got to be in the business of trying to figure out how to make people stay one more night.
Point is that if we're funding Visit Topeka, they should be making that a whole lot easier for you. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Mayor, do you have any for this conference? Thank you, Mr. Young. Appreciate your testimony. Who would like to be next? HR?
Hey, Councilman Harmon. I'm HR Cook, General Manager of the Kansas Expo Center here in Topeka. And as Kurt has alluded to, we have received transient guest tax funds for several years now. That has ranged anywhere from the current $50,000 we received in 2013 all the way up to $200,000 back in the early 2000s and late 90s. But Councilman Hiller, real quick, to kind of give you an idea of what we do as far as promoting tourism at the Expo Center, and then I'll get back to my proposal. Several months ago, we've designed a plan where each of our employees during an event, convention, sporting event, they're given a card, a cheat sheet basically, with 5 things going on that weekend in Topeka, and they're allowed to add 1/6 item of their favorite. Each employee is allowed to add one. So it could be the NOTO, it could be events going on in downtown, events going on at the zoo, and then they're allowed to give one item of a personal note, and a lot of times those are very interesting and very a lot more fun than sometimes than the list that we provide, like free pool at Terry's Billiards on, during the lunch hour, or Perupski's Deli. So it's always kind of like the local favorites. So that's kind of what we're doing to help promote that. But getting back to my proposal, again, we've our request this year is for $90,000, same amount that we requested this last year. We're extremely grateful of the transient guest tax that we received. As far as our facility, our funds are used strictly to regenerate the transient guest tax funds. We are the largest mass gathering facility in northeast Kansas, and a lot of the proposals that you hear from Visit Topeka and a lot of the events that you hear are a lot of events that go on at the Expo Center. And some of those events are cooperative in nature regarding the sales of those events, whether it be Kansas Kids or the NAIA Wrestling, or recently the reacquisition of the Kansas High School Rodeo Association coming in next weekend that we lost for a few years to Hutchinson, but we now have gotten back. Our materials are used for marketing materials, whether it be our website, in print advertising, travel to co-op with Visit Topeka or several of the hotels to the various conventions and associations, whether it be RCMA, Rejuvenate, Teams conventions to try to lure the sporting events here. A lot of times it's used for travel to other destinations because we are Topeka. We are not a Chicago. We're not a Kansas City. We're not a Las Vegas. Events aren't falling into our laps. So a lot of times what we do is we'll go to other cities that have associations, their conventions going on, their meetings going on, and we'll register as an associate and go to those conventions and get with the meeting planners there and try to talk to them about coming into Topeka. Before the venues themselves find out what we're doing and get thrown out of the building. We've been thrown out of some very fine facilities, but we've been able to garner some of our events just from stealing them from other cities, which is basically what we have to do as far as competition is concerned. Some other items of note regarding our transient guest tax: we also co-op or partner up with other entities in the city. For instance, for the High School Rodeo Championships this year, while they were in Hutchinson, downtown Hutchinson, provided a cookout where they opened up their doors after hours and they came to all the participants and they had a little cookout. We tried to one-up Hutchinson a little bit this year, and we're using some of our transient guest tax dollars in cooperation with the zoo, who has provided free admission to the participants of the High School Athletic Association, and we're providing meals so that not only do they are staying at our hotels and competing at the Expo Center, but they're going to the zoo on Saturday morning before their final competition, and we've also co-opted with them in partnering with, they were doing also a handicap, basically a handicap rodeo or a demonstration for underprivileged kids at the zoo. So we're bringing not only the participants, the families, but also some other partners or little ones coming into the zoo for that. So that is basically our request this year. Like I said, many of the events that take place in our facilities do generate transient guest tax. Capitol Plaza, which sits on our grounds, generates over $200,000 worth of transient guest tax, and I believe we've proven over year after year that we utilize our transient guest tax very wisely and very efficiently to help grow the fund, which is why we're here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Any questions from the committee? HR, I've got a question. In your materials you handed out, it says the primary expenditure is marketing of our facility to conventions, associations, or sporting events. As we have done successfully in previous years, the Kansas Expo Center will produce individually tailored marketing pieces related to specific events. In the Visit Topeka budget, they dedicate over $400,000 to sales and marketing, which I would guess would be similarly to Market Topeka for conventions, associations, and large sporting events. Why does the Expo Center feel it needs its own marketing rather than relying on Visit Topeka for that activity?
That's a very good question. As was explained, and I think Mr. Irwin with Heartland Park will probably convey and agree with me. The Visit Topeka is a entity that is marketing the entire community. It is also providing materials for other entities within the community. The Expo Center, because we are a specialized facility, feel that we can market ourselves quite wisely. We're not only in the meeting and convention business, but we also advertise in our Polestar, which is Concert Hotwire, and other trade publications, which are very unique to our industry. And our in-house marketing, a lot of times, is utilize some of those funds, our existing funds, with Visit Topeka to co-op to get a cheaper rate. But a lot of times it comes right down to, we feel that we can market our facility better than what Visit Topeka can do, because we kind of know our business a little bit better than they do. That's not the real politically correct way of saying it, but I believe that is.
Well, and I think I understand what you're saying, HR, and I certainly appreciate that, and I'm sure you can appreciate the position we're in, since this is really, these are tax dollars we're allocating, and someone could legitimately question why we're giving funds for marketing to not only to Visit Topeka, but also to Expo Center, also to Heartland Park. It raises the questions whether those funds would be better spent consolidated into one entity rather than being spread out. So that's a question we have to be able to respond to the taxpayers of Shawnee County. Any other questions of Mr. Cook? Elaine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of as a follow-up to yours, to your question, do you know what expo centers in other cities, if they, I always like the research to see what other cities are doing, and if they have marketing expenses added to their budgets, or if it is all through their Convention and Visitors Bureau?
Most cities do a combination of both, whether it's also the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the facility itself. Kansas City, Bartle Hall in Kansas City is a prime example of that.
And they have a marketing budget, okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, HR. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ray Irwin. Next.
I'm Raymond Irwin from Heartland Park, Topeka, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I have a handout, if that's okay to give it to one of our five before I did that. Basically, it's my bullet point notes and some backup information. Copies with me today, so. We're the largest Transient guest tax creator in the community. The NHRA Kansas National, which just concluded, creates nationwide recognition for Topeka and Kansas itself. I've attached to that report some Joyce Julius data, which talks about what happens on TV, the number of hits that come out on TV for the various and sundry entities that are seen. I've highlighted on there what Heartland Park and then, of course, Topeka get for that program alone, and it's significant. The Topeka in the last 3 years has gotten 1.2, almost 1.25 million in TV exposure. That's $400,000 a year. And Heartland Park on TV exposure has gotten $460,000 a year over the last 3 years. During the press conference, I was very humbled by the fact that all the drivers, every one of them, as well as NHRA, was very complimentary of our community. John Forrest last year went down and bought a suitcase down in Hillhurst, okay, before he came up because he left his or lost his in the airport or something, I don't know. But continually, we hear these organizations like that compliment Heartland Park Topeka and compliment primarily Topeka and Kansas itself. And I can't speak highly enough about that, how humbling that is to us, being able to provide the opportunity for that. That said, this year was tough on us, okay? The rain or threat of rain really hurt bad. and we'll get into that in just a minute. The summary reports I gave to you there about the economic impact that is created by Heartland Park Topeka on an annual basis is approximately $160 million per year. We create 60 FTEs from our employment, part-time and full-time employees at our location. Our advertising that we use to attract our tenants for our 200 events a year. Most people think, oh, that's that place down south that has a drag race per year. Quite the contrary. That's the biggest event we have, but we have over 200 events per year, not even including yet the Tough Mudder, which is coming up in September, which you've heard spoken about very highly, and it's a great event to come on board. We do other things as well. For instance, where there's some very serious conversations going on right now, I can't tell you the exact status of it, of moving the 4th of July event to Heartland Park Topeka at a significant savings of about 60 to 70% of your overhead expense by moving it from Lake Shawnee to us. No longer bus trips needed, park people elsewhere, no cleanup and so forth and so on. It all falls to our property. We're anxious to provide that property for that purpose, okay? We are a city-owned facility, as you know. I get the opportunity and the joy of managing it, but it is a city-owned piece of property. One of the things I want to talk about for just a minute is that I don't have numbers on the day of sales, but I do have them on the advance ticket sales, and that is that of the advance ticket sales, you'd think that perhaps more of them would be from Topeka than they are. 3% are average advance. When you talk about what comes in from the other states, Nebraska and Missouri provide 2.5 to 4.5 times as many people in advance sales for tickets to buy. Now, maybe Topeka says, well, I'll wait and see what's going to happen for weather. And of course, like on this last Sunday, they all decided to go see Grandma because it was raining at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, I respect their opportunity to go see Grandma and so forth and so on, but that hurt us significantly. We're down lower than we have been in probably 3 or 4 years, about a 30 or 40% drop in our income for that event, okay? Out of that, this year I'll be paying about $250,000 for the privilege to the NHRA for the privilege of holding that event, regardless of what people did in the city for going to restaurants, going to hotels, and things like that. And it was a great event. Side-by-side racing is some of the best I've seen because the facility was ready to go, but people just decided to stay home for the weekend. That happens. Outdoor events, that's the way it is. And I'm going to be very candid here this evening, okay? In the last several years, the downturn, 2008 was our best year. If you look at your 2008 transient guest tax collections there, you'll see that 2008 was the largest year we've had, except for the last 2 years when hotel rates have probably gone up, and that significantly offsets that change from 08 till now. We took big hits from 09 on to 2012 during the economy downturn. I personally absorbed those issues on Heartland Park Topeka. I'm not crying to blues, I'm just telling you that's the way it was. Rain in 4 of the last 5 NHRA events since 2009. Certainly not helped the tenants. We're going to change for 14, or we're going to dump the event. If they won't move it, we're going to dump it. The 3% attendance from Topeka, it's a great event for Topeka. It's a great event for our community. But the bottom line is, if people don't show up for it, it can't exist. That's talking about the NHRA. Other events, we bring in people, okay? If you look at some of the information I brought to you that beyond the Julius report, I show you the economic impact, but in there, it states what happened at the NHRA event, the benefit from it, and it talks about the event days and the people that stay over from those particular types of events. Again, addressing Ms. Hiller's, request, Hiller, get it right, excuse me, I'll get it right, for how we impact tourism. So, in 2011, because of the downturn in the economy and the fact that rain, like I said, 3 of 5 events, we had to have a $1.5 million bogey to bring the NHRA event and retain it. We did do just exactly that. And this year, we didn't hit that bogey. And so we're down, and it's going to cost me out of my pocket or somebody somewhere to make that up, to keep this event. I'm not happy about it. We can do other events, okay? We can bring in things like IHRA, okay? And quite candidly, Heartland Park will probably be better off financially for it because we don't have the big bogey to hit. But what's going to happen to tourism? Okay, can they continue to bring in the higher number of people in the community? I can't answer that question. That's a big gamble. When I'm gambling my own money, like I did for the AMA event a few years ago, lost a chunk of money on that. Threw a party for 5,000 of my closest friends, okay? That doesn't cover the bills, and it really didn't help the community either. So we aren't doing that anymore. Tough Mudder, They're talking about, and they indicated it was 8 to 10,000 people. They're telling me 15,000. Well, we'll wait and see. But I'll take the 10 or 12 all day long, because that means they're coming in here, they're buying a motel room, they're spending money in our restaurants, and they're probably going to the C-store and buying gas and candy bars and whatever else. It's a good thing. It's a great thing. The 4th of July, that event, we can turn that into a major, major community-wide, multi-day activity and event. That's something we can all work together to make it happen. And you've been to other cities, you've seen these type of events happen, and they can really, over years, can become very contagious. So if people show up from out of town, because they know Topeka's got the best 4th of July event there is. Again, these are building blocks, okay? But I'm not gonna risk, with the NHRA going away, can we replace it? That's a tough call. That's a real tough call. So anyway, our request this year is for $500,000, $500,000 in transient guest tax to go to Topeka, Heartland Park, Topeka, excuse me, to continue to do what we're doing, which is taking the risk to bring these people into town, which we've proven in the past are beneficial to our community. I would take questions.
Any questions of the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one. With Kansas Speedway down the road, do the two work at all in bringing events in, since there's huge racetracks in Wyandotte County and one here in Topeka?
I think there's some crossover there, but not perhaps as much as you might think. I think the question was asked before about different types of events and using marketing dollars for sports events like HR spoke about. The customer that I have, I think, is more, they're loyal to a fault. Okay, they'll come to a race just as competitors until they're broke. Okay, having been a racer at one time, I understand that philosophy. Okay. I don't think that they take a lot away from this. I think that perhaps we can do some more things to ride on their coattails. For instance, when they're there, they go over to Lakeside and run the asphalt track, or excuse me, the dirt track over there. When Lakeside was underwater last year, we tried like the dickens to get them to go over and hit our racetrack, knowing that we would draw some people, and we just couldn't get legs on it. It was just too soon, because no one knew it was going to be flooded that badly. So, do they take away from us? Perhaps. But it's like, what's the study? You got two circles, concentric, and you got a third one in the middle that may cross in both of them, but it may not be the same. And it isn't is the extent you might think, because racing is not like some other types of, whether you go to high school basketball or whether you go to college, watch college basketball, or or something like that, or, and then the pros. Interest is there, 3 different entities, but it's not the same in racing. It's drag racing, stock car racing, dirt track racing, drifting, okay, all different entities, and they all attract different individuals for different reasons. Competition, spectating, working, safety, lots of different portions of that. I would say, though, that we have things that I know that NASCAR and Kansas City Speedway don't have. And that is the fact that you get right up next to the racers and shake their hand and talk to them and so forth and so on. I've seen them literally signing autographs on their way to get in the car at the NHRA event. That's how NHRA does a great job in that. They make sure that their drivers and their crew members and their hangers-on are very, very available. I spent an hour and a half talking to John Force on Monday when his team was testing. I mean, I doubt very much that Jeff Gordon would spend an hour and a half talking to me about anything. So, hope I answered the question.
Any other questions? Ray, I'll ask you the same question I posed HR, because I don't want him to think I'm picking on him. A portion of your grant request would go to marketing. And obviously, one of Visit Topeka's missions is to market and bring sporting events to Topeka. Why does Heartland Park need its own marketing grant?
We actually spend about a little over $250,000 a year for our advertising function, okay? And that gets out to various and sundry entries. We have things going out in all the hotels, okay, right now. They're being handed out at all the C-stores, so we're marketing what's going on in Topeka. We know from looking at the data from the Hedges study, okay, that people are staying here overnight. That, to me, is marketing our community. They have an opportunity to become involved in our community and see things that are going on. If you go out to the mall during the NHRA event, you'll see people in the mall. You'll see them at different locations because they don't have something going on throughout the whole day. They'll go out and go to other areas. And that, to me, we're marketing ourselves by virtue of having them see those. I don't know if that answers your question or not, Mr. Harmon.
Well, does Visit Topeka not market Heartland Park?
You want me to be PC or you want me to tell you what it is? Last year, they didn't do squat, okay? And
They didn't?
and I had a conversation with the previous manager, and when she came to town, and I said, look, we'll do whatever we can to help you with that. Okay, I come to the meeting here, I guess 2 years ago, having found out literally hours before that I felt, and you may recall the letter I sent out to each and every council member, I felt that all the funds should be given to Visit Topeka and then distributed as they felt, as a professional marketing organization, where they thought it should go to get the biggest bang for the buck. I still felt that way. I found out that she wasn't going to allocate any of it to any of the entities that have been producing the bed tax through tourism, and things didn't go well after that point. And I came in and I fought for what I thought was a fair distribution and a mechanism, and I still feel that same way. That we, as entities, can, if they have new management in there that understands the various and sundry types of tourism that can be created and how it's created. A basketball fan certainly isn't going to be a drag race fan or a dirt fan. You have to market to them completely different avenues and venues. And if they understand that, and I'm on the board to help select on that committee, I'm glad to hopefully bring some of my opinions to that board to help pick the right people to do that. I think that they've got a great energy. I think they have a great will. I think it just needs direction based on who they put in top.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you very much. If someone wants some of that information, let me know. I'll get it to you.
Before you leave the podium, Mayor Wolgast.
Thank you, Chairman. Ray, I just want to acknowledge that we appreciate what you do for Heartland Park. We know you've had some difficult last few years, the weather and situations that you can't control. But I want to acknowledge that the fine leadership, what you've provided for the community, and continue to do so. Wish you well.
Thank you. I appreciate the compliment very much, and I would also like to compliment this city and this community, quite candidly. I echo what the racers and the crew people and even the NHRA people, as tough as they can be, have said. This is a wonderful, wonderful community. And I don't think enough of us as citizens, not necessarily those that are sitting here, because I think you recognize lots of things. I don't think people recognize how great this place is. They need to go to Chicago, LA, or New York, spend about 48 hours, and they'll come back really happy to be here. And I believe that to be surely true. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Irwin. Is anybody here from TPAC?
Good evening. I'm Cody Robertson. I'm the current board president at the Topeka Performing Arts Center. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you this evening. I guess I'm going to make my comments brief, and then I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Czar here. But I just wanted to speak a little bit about the history of TPAC and its relationship with the city over the last few years. I've been with the organization for going on 3 years now. I've been on the board for about 3 years. And I've been a spectator at the general fund budget sessions every one of those years. And I want to say just at the outset that the council members, you all have a impossibly difficult job, and you make some incredibly tough decisions at those meetings. And I think you all sincerely should be commended for that. And Ms. Schwartz, I know you haven't had I don't believe you've had the pleasure yet, but I wish you well.
Thank you.
And Mayor Wolgast and Mr. Harmon and Ms. Hiller, I know that the three of you are probably all well aware that TPAC's had a tough go of it in budget nights over the past 3 years as well. In the time that I've been with the organization, we've gone from receiving $250,000 in general funding down to $94,500 this year in general funding. And that's obviously that's a substantial hit for us to take. And just to be clear, TPAC, we are an arts organization, and we are very committed to our mission as an arts organization and committed to our mission to foster and promote the arts in this community. But we also, we're very mindful, and we understand that at the end of the day, the value we bring to this community and the value that we bring to these meetings and these discussions is as a driver of economic impact in this community. And we can do that. TPAC is very capable of doing that. We generate a large amount of sales tax. We pay out a generous amount in wages to full and part-time and temporary employees that work with us. And we put heads on beds. And I know that's the number that we need to speak about tonight, and we do that. TPAC does that. We bring in shows, we bring in national touring acts, And we put heads on beds not only in the form of patrons that come to our shows, but also in the staff and the road crews that come with those shows. And our ability to bring in those shows and our ability to bring in the larger shows, the ones that have the greater impact, the bigger impact, is really only limited by the amount of funding we have available to market ourselves and to cast that broad net. And it comes back to the same adage that it always does: you got to spend money to make money. And so when we find ourselves in a position that we're hamstrung by our budget and struggling to pay the bills every month, unfortunately, it just makes it difficult. It makes it difficult to impossible for us to go after the big fish and to bring in the big shows and the big touring acts that create that economic impact that we would like to create, and that I know that the community and the council would like to see us create as well. We are making changes. We've been forced in a position by our budget, as most organizations have over the last couple of years, to make pretty drastic changes in the way that we do business and the way we operate, and we've done that. And I hope you've noticed that the difference in the volume and the diversity of programming already, and I can assure you that over the next few years, you're going to see that even more so. And I attribute that largely to the commitment of the board, to the organization, and to making this work, and also to our new executive director, Jan Czar, who just joined TPAC in mid-April. And Mr. Czar has years of experience programming shows in communities and in venues very similar size to ours, and he's brought some great energy and some great ideas to the organization already. And I think all of you are going to see that come to fruition over the next few months and years. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Czar and let him.
Before you
explain a
step
little
away
more.
from the
Yes, sir.
microphone, I didn't catch your name.
Oh, Cody Robertson.
Cody Robertson?
Robertson,
Okay.
yes.
Great, thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Welcome, Mr. Czar.
Thank
Wel-
you
welcome
very
to
much.
Topeka.
I am definitely the new kid on the block here. Hopefully it won't be for much longer, but as Cody said, I have worked in communities of this size, anywhere from North Carolina to Idaho to Kentucky, and now here. What I bring is I bring a lot of expertise. I bring 26 years of what I know is to generate programming and good programming. And for the arts, you talk about tourism, they're absolutely right. We need to have tourism. We need those folks to stay over that extra night on a Sunday when there's a race going on, or if they're coming in for that event, let them come in and let them see what we have to offer, not just for the convention, but what is available in the city wide. And we bring a unique situation as a performing arts center. We're not an arena. We don't do the very large shows, but we can make an impact. We make an impact by making sure our target audience, whether that be here, locally, regionally, and sometimes even nationally. When I have started in similar communities, I've come into a community where the events were very nailed to none, and because of my connections with promoters and artists, I have been able to increase those numbers. When I was in Boise, the first year, we had 60 events that I walked into, and that second year, that after I was there, I was able to increase those events to 144 events for that year. And so I have those connections. I can bring in those shows. I can bring in or help bring in and entice those larger acts that come here, not just for heads in the beds for the regional, but what those acts bring. And on an average large show, you're looking at 30 to 50 people that are going to stay here at a night. And if we can get 10, 20 more of those shows that are coming through, that's going to bring in those heads in the beds for us. On an average, that's an amazing thing. I'm still trying to learn the ropes here. I'm not going to tell you that I know everything right now and what's going to attract in Topeka, but that's what I'm here for. I'm a change agent. I listen to what the community has to say, and I want to bring in things. I think Topeka is at the verge of what Boise, Idaho was back in 2001. And the revitalization of the downtown area and everybody getting together, making sure that it wasn't just about, and it's not just about the community itself, but it's reaching out to those people in the community. It's reaching out to the regional artists that we can bring in and make sure that the arts are important in our community. The arts have to be a part of this community. It's not always just about entertainment. I'm talking about the arts. So are we going to bring in entertainment? Absolutely. But we also bring a unique, different type of entertainment to this community. And I'm not going to rehash all the things that Cody said or HR has said or anybody else here. We're all in this together. Absolutely, we're all in this together. I sit here a little dumbfounded in the sense, the gentleman here that was saying that maybe, what is your name again? Raymond Irwin with the race park, in the sense that I'm a little bit confused in sense, but I know we're after every dollar that we can get. But if we could pool all our resources together and make sure that everything was that Topeka is about, and all the different venues, avenues that we can do, and put that together and make sure that we're in that one pool, that one Visit Topeka, absolutely. But what I'm hearing is that's not been the case in the past. We'll use these dollars in going out and making sure that I get into national magazines, that I make sure that when I go to conferences, I'm bringing a brochure about what we can do and what we have to offer to these artists and to these touring companies. That's all I have to say right now.
Any other questions of Mr. Allen? I'm sorry, Mr. Azar, pardon me. Elaine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your funding with the arts and everything, and we know that even at the state capitol, the arts were, didn't get funded with state funds. So is there grant funding that's available that either on the national level that has been picking up the slack?
There is, but again, those dollars are few and far between, as you know. The national arts funding, it's hard to, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is very hard to get those dollars, and a lot of that is going into those major cities, to the secondary cities. We are really a tri-state city, so one of the things with grant dollars is they want us to do something that is definitely unique with those dollars, and presenting some sort of different series that's going to bring that diversity. And so you really have to make sure that's what you're bringing. Does that necessarily bring heads into beds all the time? No, but what it does is it enhances the community. That's where the grant dollars come from. That's mostly what when we're writing for art grants, is that's what they're going to be looking for, those type of unique cultural events.
Any other questions? Karen?
Yes.
Two, please. Welcome.
Thank
It's
you.
great to have you here, and we have kind of bottomed out, hopefully, for lack of a better term, with TPAC, and have started to build back up, so hopefully it is a good time for you to be here. I have two questions. One, could you give us some examples of how you were able to take, in Boise, from 60 shows to 144? How did people have to show up at those to make them work?
They do have to show up, but most of what that is bringing promoters. So you bring in a couple promoters that's going to show that their shows are going to sell out, and then it just kind of becomes a domino effect. And so, and one of the things that we're trying to do is bring in some more of the national acts. If you look at what happened with Bill Maher, we're looking at some other acts, acts that have been here that haven't been here for a while. We're going to bring those acts back. I have relationships, as I'm sure that HR here has relationships in the arena setting. I have relationships in the performing arts setting. Are we going to sometimes compete against each other? Maybe, maybe not. We have a different type of setting than an arena does. And so we both can live and work in the same city. One of the things that I plan to do is, we're inundated with what's happening in Manhattan, and we're inundated with what's happening down the street with us in Lawrence and then Kansas City. Where I need to work at is see what's happening in Salina and what's happening in Wichita, and work with those people to do some block booking with them, see if we can bring those artists, this be the middle stopover for those unique artists that are coming through. And that's how I do that.
Thank you. And I had that second question. if I
Go
may.
ahead.
One of the things that, again, is it's a little different than just spending cash to bring a convention or a group here, but we have struggled with here in Topeka, simply people in Topeka loving all of our various venues and using them, and therefore having the family decide to come here for Thanksgiving or summer vacation or whatever. And in particularly in the case of TPAC, a sense of community ownership of TPAC, for people to feel like it's theirs. Do you have any particular things in mind yet for what you might do at TPAC to have people here in Topeka own it, feel like they own it more than they do today?
I'm getting a little bit of sense of what that is. I still haven't hit the nail on the head, but in other communities I've been to, it's that sense of ownership that we have to get them vested in again, where they were invested back in the 90s, to put TPAC over here, to take an auditorium and turn it into a performing arts center. We have to get everybody, I think TPAC is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of fallen to the wayside in some ways. We need to put TPAC back on the map, not just for the community, but for the region. And so, yes, I would be planning shows. A lot of people don't plan shows around the holidays because they say, oh, everybody leaves, but a lot of people come into the community. One of my most successful events I did was to do a Riders in the Sky show, which I had them actually write a show for us, a Christmas show around Thanksgiving. And people thought I was silly. They said, you're going to get 500 people. We sold out 2,000 people. I sold out the hall at 2,000 people for a matinee show, so on a Saturday. So those are the things that I'm looking for.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Zard.
Sorry, could I just
Yes.
follow up with a couple more real quick comments? I hope all of you can appreciate that I'm not nearly prepared to throw the impressive volume of numbers at you that Bill did, but we'd probably be remiss if we didn't talk dollars at all. Our request this year was for $100,000 in transient guest tax funding. That's not just a nice round number that we pulled out of thin air. That's one, it correlates to the amount that we received, roughly correlates to the amount that we received in 2006 and years prior from transient guest tax funding. It also is roughly equivalent to the amount that we lost in general funding this year. And as I mentioned earlier, I recognize, I think all of us recognize the incredible strain that the council and that the budget is under, that the general fund is under right now and has been under the last couple of years. And TPAC, we believe that we fit well within this fund. We fit well within the purpose of this fund, and we think that this request is appropriate and it is an appropriate way to take some of that stress off of the general fund, and that's where that dollar amount comes from. And that's all I wanted to mention. So unless there's any other questions.
Mr. Mayor?
Sir.
For Pam, on that this sheet here, the one that has the requests and the two previous years, for TPAC, for 2012, if I'm looking at the right one, it doesn't show an amount there.
They didn't get anything in 2012.
In 2012, and then in,
13 was the first year they got, and then anything in the last several years. I think it was the last one.
I think we received 10 in 2010.
Right.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that sheet is just how much they got, not how much they asked for.
Right. This is their actual grant now,
thank you.
but they didn't get anything in the last 2 years.
Okay, thank
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good. Okay, next conferee, Curtis Pitts.
Good evening. Really appreciate the opportunity to come up and visit with you today. This has been a very long process, and I really appreciate the administration and the council working hard to make sure we have access and at least an opportunity to present. First of all, we thought for a long time, it was a mythical group, but we're finding out that it's tangible, touching, and feeling people. So we're having access and an opportunity to try to partner with you for success. Some years ago, we went to a workshop with the chamber here in town, talked about when black and white equals green. It talked about when minority businesses and organizations can come together to generate revenue and a dollar base that can enhance the community. Like the sales tax, we're extremely excited about this opportunity because a friend of mine asked me, he goes, well, what are they doing with that sales tax? And I'm telling you, I said, well, your brother works at one of the Target facilities here. And he goes, really? I said, and your cousin is working at one of the other places that the chamber brought in. So even though it might not be exactly in our communities, having an economic impact that we can actually see and feel. You have many great organizations here tonight that are asking for some tremendous dollars. I felt kind of bad by the amount that we requested based off of what they're doing and the dollars that they're requesting, but I also know they do fantastic work. I have no problem with what they're requesting because one of the things I love is when my brother calls me early in the morning and said, man, Topeka, Kansas, I'm watching the races on television in Florida. He goes, man, they got one of the fastest tracks in the United States. So what they're doing is having a great impact, and I appreciate it. The thing that we're here to talk about this evening is the Heart of America Kansas Black Expo. And the reason that this event is so important is because it does put heads on pillows in Topeka, Kansas. Last year we had one of our greatest events. Some of you all came out and participated. We had a lot of fun. And we had thousands of people coming in town. The thing that I'm more excited about is that families all over the country are planning their family reunions around this event during Labor Day. And the reason that's important is because we're actually one of the most important places in the world here. And I ask you all this question. We're the brown city that did so much for America. Growing up in the South and in Florida, you guys really enhanced my life here. I just want to say to you, we need to take this opportunity and look at what are we doing outside of the box to create these cultural events. I've been to some concerts at TPAC, awesome venue. But I want to say one thing about our event that's a little bit different. We want people to come to town because we're really, in our minds, a suburb of Kansas City, actually the best suburb and the best that they have to offer in this geographical area. And as we start to think about that, as we have these events, we see people flocking in from Wichita, from Kansas City, and also from Omaha. Now vendors and other people are coming in from St. Louis, Atlanta, Dallas, and Denver. Our objective with this event is not just an event to talk about race relations and talk about parenting. As you see the brochure in front of you, you'll find out that we do a lot more than come together and have concerts. We bring in leadership, we bring in speakers, we bring in active participants around the city. We've had the mayor of Wichita who loved the event so much that if we're not careful, they'll duplicate it and take it. But what we're doing right here with our cultural event here is that we're saying to America that Topeka hasn't changed in the sense that the objective is to enhance race relations, to enhance business opportunities, to bring in new businesses to Topeka, Kansas, whether they be minority or majority operated and manned. What's different about our request than everyone else is that one thing. You'll find out that 6 to 7% of our budget goes to administrative costs. 99% of the people who participate in this program are volunteers. And like myself, until a week ago, most of our volunteers live at or below the poverty level. And what we're trying to say to you is that if you bring us to the table with this event and in this funding source, we'll be able to bring in a pool of people because, as he said, 58% is not a good number in the housing business. With our economy being what it is, it's not a terrible number, an unacceptable number, but there are areas that we can reach out to bring heads onto the beds that we have not been reaching out to in the past. Is this a black event or a Latino event? No. It's open to everyone. It's an awesome event. The main objective is to do nothing more than to make sure that race relations and the color lines are starting to be erased. What do we do at this event? We bring people in. We let them see the awesome Brown Museum that Topeka's put together. We let them see the Kansas Historical Museum, awesome, our state capitol. They're visiting other places around the city of Topeka that we assume that some communities wouldn't be interested in. All we're asking you to do is this. Give us an opportunity to enhance that 58% up to 60 to 70%. Anytime you do demographic numbers, you go and find out where the areas of growth are. And the areas of growth are exactly what we're talking about. This is Topeka, Kansas, the most open, kindest, caring place that I've ever been in the United States. We have to reach out economically, financially, and say, this area we can tap into and generate dollars. We had an event in Kansas City here a few weeks ago, and they flew in teams from all over the United States. And within a weekend, we were able to fill up 500 rooms. The difference between Topeka and Kansas City is that we have to market it as a suburb of Kansas City. But for the people who are in Wichita, Kansas City, Omaha, Lawrence, Denver, Dallas, this is truly a destination spot. And with your support, we can continue to grow those numbers. What do we ask? It's going to be a shocking thing that we're going to ask right here in front of everyone. It would be best for us because we thought in the beginning that we'll be talking about 2013, because in 2013 you were changing your regs and your rules of how you're going to operate these dollars, and you were putting it together. So we wound up having to come in on 2014. Actually, we'd like to partner with Visit Topeka because they're doing great things, and we're asking them publicly, hey, how can we create a funding source that doesn't have to come to us, that you can get as a pool of dollars that can help us bring in the acts that are going to draw the people in from all over the Midwest. We have that ability and that resource, and you have the administrative capability, so we're not above saying that you have to give us any dollars. We just like to see some dollars placed somewhere that we can access and have them hire the entertainment for our events. We're not trying to create another administrative financial line for you to chase down. But we're at a critical crossroads here, and we're in a competitive state called the United States. And if we don't compete with those other cities and communities, we are going to fall behind. The Target Distribution Center, awesome. Menards, awesome. And I think Mars is coming online very quickly, awesome. We must continue to grow our city in a fashion that is welcoming and complete, and it embraces everyone. And all we're asking you to do for 2013 and 14 is bring us to the table and allow us to grow those numbers and to increase our tax base. If you see in our report, we talk about bringing people into town to market their services and let them see what Topeka has to offer. When you look at Interstate 70, 35, you find that you have a direct access to the heartland of America. And that's the reason we call it the Heartland America Black Expo. And the reason we chose Grant Cushenberry, because he represents many of us. Someone from the community, struggling to help the community, giving us all to the community, and asking very little from the community. And if you look at our numbers compared to everyone else, I hope I don't get as many questions, but it is business. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. Any questions of Mr. Pitts? Karen?
Curtis, it's good to see you. And I was at Grand Fest last year. Got a couple questions, and you may have alluded to the answers to them in your comments as you sort of wrapped up. At this point, having seen this array of applications, are you still asking for money for underwriting your whole event from us or not?
No, we would not ask you to underwrite it, because actually we're asking you to do a third of what we're actually budgeting for the event. Last year, we wouldn't ask you to do anything that we wouldn't do for ourselves as a community. Individuals, some organizations, smaller organizations ponied up dollars and went out and rounded up the funds to get this event done. But if you're working with people who are from the poorest section of town, we shouldn't expect them to do more than we're asking other groups. So we're saying, can you help us, meet us halfway and do what we're doing and invest into this program?
So the $35,000 here is 1/3 of your budget?
For 2014, it is, yes, ma'am. For 2013, it would be about half of our budget.
If I may.
Go ahead.
There were vendors from out of town last year, but I really seemed like most of the people that were there were local.
We had several family reunions that were going on at that particular time, and one of the things you'll find is that always there have been people who come from Wichita, Kansas City, Omaha, who stayed in the beds. And I know you saw all those people out there. I hope you didn't know everybody because I'd get nervous, but there were a lot of people from out of town there. And I know that we paid for rooms that had guests in from out of town who were vendors from out of town. So the idea of it being a local event, that probably is not one that would be a sound statement.
Well, it's a challenge for everybody to get the out-of-town folks here, so I was just observing and asking. What the council has been doing over recent years is progressively, as maybe you knew, but maybe you didn't, getting itself out of the business of directly supporting particularly events. And you heard people earlier talk about the creation of the bid fund 2 years ago so that any dollars that came from this guest tax source were vetted through the professionals who do that sort of bid fund placement so that we let them do that. Did you approach Visit Topeka for bid fund assistance for this event?
And I want to clarify a couple of things. We've been trying to find out how this process worked.
Okay.
And I'm sure you have staff and elected officials who will tell you that we're trying to understand how the process worked. And the reason I was so comfortable in asking, Visit Topeka, because I know there's kind of been a leadership change, but over the years we've gotten some bags to give the guests for the conferences. But as far as them investing real actual dollars, time in, we haven't seen that. And as far as events, we do events, year round. We're asking you to support an event that's what we call a state and regional event that draws, people in from all over the Midwest. So it's not just a singular event where we're saying this is all we do annually. That's not it at all. We're saying that we're doing something that's drawing in people to our Topeka to look at it as a place to invest and live and stay the night for family activities.
I'll ask one just to bring that together. Have you then yet asked Visit Topeka about whether this event could be funded with the bid fund?
Quick question, I'm going to say this to you again. I just asked them right now because I just found a tangible person
Okay.
that we can talk to.
So that's a no, not yet.
I mean,
Not yet.
we couldn't communicate with them because we didn't know who and how the process worked, because in the beginning we were told that to make financial requests they had to go through Visit Topeka. And that's what we were told for 2 years. Then we come to find out that this process is, I don't know if it's new or because all of a sudden we were calling and asking last year about the process. Then all of a sudden we found that they had changed some funds and some additional funds and funded something else. And we're like, wait a minute, who do we talk to for real? Because if we didn't know the process and then all of a sudden the process pops up and takes the carryover funds and funds something else for the same fiscal year, we're not blind about what's happening, but we are trying to figure out who and how to process. But your staff and the leadership has been chasing us down this year, trying to show us how the process works now. And we really, really, really appreciate it because they did an awesome job, because we would have never have known who to go to, because we thought we were getting ready to have to go through Visit Topeka again.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Pitts? Seeing none, thank you very much, Curtis.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony and your appearance before the committee. Are there any other conferees that wish to be heard on the grant application process? Seeing none. The next item is to consider the budget proposals. One of the, based on handout by Pam Semeski, if we are to have an ending balance for 2014 of $150,000, then we will need to come up with cuts of approximately $500,000 to reach that point. If we want a lower or higher ending balance, that figure will vary accordingly. It seems to be that one of the critical issues is whether we should use transient guest tax funds to transfer to the city for the wayfinding signs. If I can offer some perspective for the committee. This came up 8 years ago when I was first elected. There was originally a proposal to spend $200,000 for wayfinding signs to be paid for by general improvement funds. And we were set to vote on it, and Councilman Alcala noted that the transient guest tax proceeds for that particular quarter were much higher than expected. And so the motion was made to fund those signs, not from the general improvement fund, but from transient guest tax funds. And the entire council voted, I believe it was unanimous, to fund the wayfinding signs through transient guest tax funds. That is the last time the council considered that issue, if I'm recalling it correctly. I think that issue needs to go back to the council. For the council to tell us, from a policy point of view, whether the council wants transient guest tax funds to be used for wayfinding signs, or whether we can identify another funding source. I think until that issue is resolved, I think it's a bit premature to consider the entire funding request. Mayor, I'm glad you're here. What's your thought on that, taking that issue to the council, whether in a work session or whatnot? I just really feel it's a substantial policy question. And it's not whether wayfinding signs are useful. I think they are. I think they're very useful. The policy question is, how do we pay for them? It's certainly, correct me if I'm wrong, City Attorney, but it's not a question of whether legally the transient guest tax funds can be used for wayfinding signs. That is a legal expenditure, is it not?
That's correct.
All right. So the policy question then is whether we want, from a policy point of view, to use transient guest tax funds for the wayfinding signs, and if we do not, then we need to identify another funding source. I think it's a significant enough policy issue that I think it's a matter that should go back for discussion by the entire council. What do the rest of you feel about that? Karen?
Let me clarify what you said. Basically, the one time it was funded with this source, it was because we had unexpected revenue.
That's my recollection. I'm relying on 8 years' worth of memory, and I couldn't find anything particular in the minutes, but I seem to recall that. There's somebody here that remembers better than me, but that was my recollection, is that the revenues from the transient guest tax funds were much higher than were expected. It was considered somewhat of a surplus, and so that's why the motion was made to fund the signs from the transient guest tax. But that's the last time we've looked at that issue. Obviously, we have many new different council members. I think it's an important enough policy decision that it needs to go back to the entire council for discussion and give us some guidance as to what the council wants to do on that point. Then once that decision is made, then I think we're in a better position to go through the grant request to come up with possible cuts. Karen?
I think that's fine. We had at our last meeting, someone asked whether these signs were eligible for the new what is now MAP funding, whether there were grants available whereby we might be able to get some help with those signs with only having to put up 20%. And I was doing my very best to follow up on all those loose ends, but I didn't personally follow up on that one. Do we have any information about that?
Mr. Fyander, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Excuse me. We are checking with KDOT. Some of the rules have not solidified with the new program, so we are awaiting some direction from that level.
Thank you.
I'm okay. I think they're important.
I agree.
think they're very important, so if we need to wait a little bit, fine, but we might be able to give the council some feedback about how we're seeing this fall as well.
What's your thought, Elaine?
I agree. I mean, in fact, those two amounts, the 150,000 and 200,000 in the general fund, they're questionable to me as to what it has to do with the transient guest fund, but I'm sure there's history there. And you have the history.
Mayor, what's your thought?
Yes, and I don't disagree. I think it's, and if you hold back, because it is a little bit of a change here of direction, make sure where we're together on it.
Yeah, like I said, we haven't looked at it for 8 years, and I think that, I think it's an appropriate question. Mr. Colson, I realize you're waiting for us to complete our work so you can finalize your 2014 budget. I'm certainly aware of that. Are you okay if we defer these decisions until we can solicit council input on the wayfinding sign issue?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely we are. We were hoping, as many of you know, to start doing budget presentations in June. Based on travel schedules, we're going to get pushed back into July. We haven't finalized that yet, so I think we have some time to deal with this.
Keller?
I do think, I appreciate Councilwoman Schwartz's question about the 200,000 transfer to the general fund. That has floated around. I think it's important to note, based on the way this sheet appears, that really that was always just a transfer to the general fund until last year. It's only been tagged as a zoo use once. And that was in 2012. So it has not been a zoo designated budget item except the one time. And it was kind of moving forward that way, but just for the record.
So does can I ask you a question?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So does the zoo, which is a part of the city, have their
Right.
own budget in addition to this amount of money, the 200,000 that went to the zoo last year? I mean, is that in the budget? Surely there's a budget line item for the zoo in the
Yes.
city budget.
Oh, yes.
Right.
There is.
Yeah.
So this is in addition to the city budget, the line item,
In the
in
middle.
addition to it. So I guess I'm questioning why we have pieces here and pieces there.
Mr. Wiley, did you want to say something? Or you want to defer to the city manager or Pam or whoever?
Go ahead. Well, okay, I'm just going to talk.
Go ahead.
It is, as Councilmember Schwartz states, it is in addition to the city's regular budget. I think the concept here was to provide some additional funds to support the zoo in terms of attracting activities to the zoo. So nothing more than that.
But it could go back into the fund, it could go back into the line item for the zoo for the budget. And rather than taking 200,000 out of the transient guest fund, if the council so decided to put it in from the general fund for the zoo, for their budget, that could be done. And get it out of the transient guest fund.
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner, absolutely we could. I mean, we've built the budgets. Budget's tight. This was not another source of funds that was identified because of the unique nature of the zoo and its ability to attract people. We thought it was a legitimate use of funds. We certainly, if a determination was made that those funds were absolutely required and they weren't available under this, we would certainly have the option to recommend to the council a budget with an increased line item of 200,000 if necessary.
Well, between now and the time that we do the budget, the big budget, I'd like to know what the revenue to the city is from the railroad heritage, the Great Overland Station, the Riverfront Park, the Historic Preservation Fund. What is the revenue from these in addition to the zoo? I mean, is the zoo bringing in revenue from travel and tourism that we're not capturing somewhere?
May I just point out, I've approached Overland Station about getting some revenue numbers from them. I don't have them currently. The Riverfront Park is not in place yet. The city has bought the property, it's been transferred over to Shawnee County. This money is, from the point of consolidation, would be sent over to the county for the development of the park. But the park has not been developed at this point around the Great Overland Station. But we can sure get you the revenue numbers for the Great Overland Station.
How much money have we given to the riverfront?
It's had 106,000 since 2000
Every year?
2009. we give 106th. There was a resolution passed that set up the payment to the station and to the Riverfront Park.
Could I, Mr. Chairman? if I
Please,
could
go ahead, Mayor.
Add, and actually, you see those two together add up to $200,000. And Pam, correct me on the history. It was determined when the sales, the transit guest tax at some point, that $200,000 would go to railroad heritage. 94,000 of that goes to the Great Overland Station, which pays the mortgage, pays the cost of the renovation of the building, and the other 106,000 goes to a fund to create a riverfront park. So it really isn't, it's not a decision we make on a yearly basis. It's been in place, and until so many more years until it is done. I don't, and that's,
I believe it's 2015. It's when 1% of the transient guests will go off. 1% of the transient guest. Isn't it 15, Mary?
and actually it'd be good to get, there's a little document that says, it explains this, which you should have for your
And the
general
Shawnee County
knowledge.
Parks and Rec has this fund? I mean, it's worth 106,000 every year going into their
With-
fund, or where?
With the consolidate, what had been happening is we had kept it in a capital project fund within the city, and we transferred this money over to the project. But at the point of consolidation, we sent them the balance of that Riverfront Park with the restrictions that it has to be spent on this. And then this year, we'll be sending 106,000 over to Shawnee County, and in future years unless the committee and the council changes. I mean, it's a resolution, it can be changed by the council if they so choose.
Okay.
And we can
there's
sure
more.
get you a copy of the resolution. I think Jenny already has a copy of Center.
Karen?
I do think, to help the city manager and the finance manager with the budget, that I think I could be comfortable agreeing tonight what our recommendation would be on the, what the estimated receipts would be, so that they could plug that into the budget. We talked last time about whether the $2.1 million, whether we would be comfortable with that number or not. We got a little information that in the past that the expenses had been budgeted over the revenue in order to sort of drain that fund down. I would be comfortable moving forward the 2.1 million in this estimate of the 6% transient guest tax receipts plus the 350,000 for the extra percent for soccer. Understanding that if we did come in a little short, as long as we set our budget up so that we would expect to have that $165,000 fund balance at the end as well, I think that would give us a cushion. So, you know, I would be comfortable taking the 2014 column that they have, affirming the $165,000 starting fund balance, and the two revenue items as shown with an expected revenue of 2615, 428, or fund balance and revenue, and then expecting to have there be 165, 428, and a remaining fund balance, that we would spend exactly what we expected to come in, so that they can get the master budget moving. That make sense?
Elaine?
Thank you. With what we heard tonight at 58% occupancy in the hotels, is this really is this 2,100,000, is it gonna happen? I mean, if we are losing the occupancy, and this is what funds the transient guest tax, is that, and I guess maybe my question is to Pam, is that a doable number for revenue?
We thought it was a reasonable number, based on past performance and talking to Visit Topeka. Bill might have more of an opinion if he thinks the 2.1 is a reasonable amount to receive in.
I think that's reasonable.
Could you step up to the microphone, Bill? please.
Sorry. I do think that's a reasonable estimate. We have seen in our market in the last 3 or 4 years some average rate improvements that have made that number. While occupancies suffered, we've seen those rates go up, so I think that's a reasonable number.
Okay, then that's good.
Bill, as long as you're at the podium, it's a question that's kind of been bugging me. There's a new hotel complex being built. Yes, I see it on,
Sure.
was it I-470? It's there by Cracker Barrel and whatnot.
Right.
You know, it strikes me maybe the reason we have 50% occupancy is we have overcapacity.
Reasonable.
So how do we, at what point does it, as a community, do we say, okay, I think we have enough hotels?
We've, in the hotel industry, I'm put on my hotel industry hat, and the hotel industry have said that about 4 hotels ago. And questionable as to, you know, the logic and the financial performance and the people that are building the hotels, or curious as to, you know, how they think that they're going to make it better, building additional hotels in the market. So I don't have an answer for that question.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't have an answer either, but it strikes me that I think we have an overcapacity issue. And that's driving the numbers down. Mr. Young, do you have a thought on that? I'm not trying to
No,
open
but
the door here.
there really is 2 ways to look at that. Either we're overbuilt or we're undersold from a marketing standpoint.
Fair.
Okay? So I'm not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of having too many hotel rooms, because if we had less hotel rooms, we're limiting Visit Topeka's ability to go after the large conventions and markets that we want them to go after. So I would prefer to look at it from a standpoint of being undersold.
Karen?
And there are times, I think of when the races are in town, when we are sold out and people are
Absolutely.
billeting out in surrounding communities,
Absolutely.
right? Okay, so that's not 58% every day, it's 100%
No,
some days
that's
and
an
30%
average.
some days
At the
or
end of
something
the, I
like
mean,
that.
that's an average at the end of the year.
And no matter how many rooms we have, when we look at the revenue for the last few years, it's been fairly steady. So maybe 58% this year was 65% last year when there wasn't a different hotel?
We were 62, sticks in my mind, the year before, so we dropped from 62 to 58. I think that, and don't quote me on that, but somebody that's watching out there will correct me after this meeting tonight, but.
Because I'm just looking at the numbers, they're really pretty
Yeah.
steady, and then we went up, well, we hope we'll go up just a little bit.
But Bill alluded to it, there's 2 things that drive the revenue number, that 2.1 number, okay? We can do it through occupancy, or we can do it through an increase in what we call average daily rate. And the ideal environment would be where both of those are climbing. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, I would like to get to the point where competition in the industry in my hotel doesn't mean that I'm stealing business from Bill down the street or from Dean down the street. I'm stealing it from Omaha, Lincoln, Wichita,
Right.
wherever. We're not to that point, folks. Competition right now is amongst the 30 hotels to a certain extent.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your additional testimony. Karen, I appreciate your comment about adopting the revenue. I'm a little uncomfortable adopting one without the other. I'm just more comfortable adopting revenue and expenditures at the same time. I'm not,
I might not have been clear.
okay.
What I thought was we could decide how we wanted to balance the budget. Obviously, so what I was thinking is, if we started with the 165 and we counted on the 22,100,000 plus 350,000 in revenue, and we might not itemize it yet, but we planned for a corresponding 2,450,000 in expenses, and to leave that balance of 165 428 at the end of the year, that would give us a framework to work from as we do the details. And I felt like the 165,000, if you deduct that from the 2.1 million just for transient guest for our visiting services, if somehow we didn't make that, we've been at 1.96 for the last few years, and we'd break even. We'd be okay. It would have a cushion. And then if we could beat it, that'd be great.
I don't understand it.
So,
I'm sorry, I don't understand. I guess it's too late. Do you understand it, Luann?
I get the gist.
Okay.
it was just to put the framework in, and then we could continue working on the details of the expenses.
But I agree with Rich that it's, you know, to recommend something to the council, to recommend what the revenues would be without the expenses is really not a real good recommendation
Yeah.
in business.
I would just soon take it up all at once. Mayor, are you comfortable, we can visit later about bringing the issue before the council on the wayfinding sign, transient guest? I really think that's our
Yes.
next. And I just do not make any other decisions tonight except to recommend that the entire council look at that issue and provide us some, what the council's policy wants to be on funding the wayfinding signs.
And I agree, if if this works into the framework of putting our budget together, I think it's always helpful you've received the recommendations here tonight and mull these a bit and think about
Right.
when their suggestions and come together gradually, in our own minds on the funding levels.
Okay,
Takes a little while.
And maybe
Thank you.
Bill will get some good news about KDOT.
true. Mr. Colson, do you have anything else to add before we adjourn?
No, Mr. Chair, I feel comfortable.
Dave, okay, all right. Want to thank all the go ahead.
We had other in the agenda. In the course of preparing for this meeting, we just appointed the representatives to the Historic Preservation Fund, and they need to get going. I observed that I think there was an oversight when we redid the ordinance a few months ago with some language that will, I think we need an amendment that will make that ordinance clearer so that newly formed committee can work. And I think everybody's got it.
Got what?
There's a historic preservation fund. It's just one page that is our statutory guidance for the historic preservation fund. Oh,
Karen, I got your email. I wasn't following you. I didn't understand what you wanted.
okay. It's actually on the back of I saw it on the packet that got given out today. I've got so many papers up here. You all have it.
Are you talking about
The document with the, okay.
Are you referring to ordinance 19763?
They got a packet today that had the new names on it. It'll be easier if you're looking at it. I can't,
The historic
Here.
historic
Okay.
you got,
preservation fund?
right,
Okay.
this document.
Okay.
Here's an extra one if you need one. It describes under the very first section, Part B talks about what the money can be used for out of the Historic Preservation Fund. It says, money shall be expended only on projects that facilitate tourism resulting from the preservation and promotion of the city's historical assets, including but not limited to, the first one is restoring, preserving sites listed on registers and goes into some detail. The second one is marketing the city's historical assets. And the third says providing financial commitments associated with securing grant funding from government or private sources. Then it follows up and says that the money from number 2 and 3 together shall not exceed 15%. Councilman Harmon, you'll remember that the issue there, that the goal was to provide at least some of that money, up to 15%, to market the assets, which could be signs or historical markers and that sort of thing, and to put up match money for grants to do plans or inventories. We're using it now for the city's historical site inventory. But that specific language did not get into number 3. When you get down to the bottom, it says that disbursements of funds for sections 2 and 3 shall not exceed 15% of the total. I'm concerned that number 3 says, talks about match money for grants. Almost all of the applicants use the money from number 1 for match money for grants. I think we need an amendment in number 3 that simply inserts for purposes of planning and or inventories in that language. This just came to my attention yesterday, so I started working on it this morning, and staff did not have time to get back on it.
I'm still confused.
It's circular. The deal is that number 3 talks about providing the way it's worded today says providing financial commitments associated with securing grant funding from government or private sources. That was intended to be match money. I'm concerned that the way that, because that's stated so broadly, that it could be argued that item number 1 could not be used to secure grants, could not be used as match money.
Can you explain why this, I mean, what is the problem? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm confused as to, I hear what you're saying, that to be used as match, you know, that you want to add that to number 3, but what's the concern? I mean, there's usually a reason somebody wants to do something, so.
There was a lot of controversy over adding B and C, or adding numbers 2 and 3 to this ordinance, to allow some of that historic preservation money to be used for something other than fixing up buildings.
And the 15% of the total amount of the funds, it should not exceed the 15%.
The items 2 and 3, whatever is identified in numbers 2 and 3.
So what they're spending on marketing the city's historical assets and providing financial commitments can't exceed 15% of the total amount.
Well, so what,
I think we need to have legal look at it and consider recommending to the council
An amendment.
an amendment to this,
Well-
and pretty soon, because that group wants to start work.
Mayor, you were on that committee last year, weren't you?
So was I.
But
I'm
not following the discussion. And it's a technical nature. I
It's
think
very
we need to have,
technicated.
we
Well-
need to have a legal look at it. and
Yeah,
see if we need to
I
do
think,
this.
because I'm not understanding it. So, Mary, on behalf of the legal department, is this something you're looking at?
I can certainly look at it.
Short version is I think there's a technical problem we need to look at soon.
Well, I'm certainly willing to look at whatever legal provides, but kind of like Councilwoman Wells, I'm not interested in developing a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Yeah, did somebody come to you with this language problem, or is this something you just discovered on your own?
It's the first time I've seen it without all the strikeouts and changes that were in it when we passed it. And so I read back through it because we're appointing people to that committee and tasking them with getting going on a request for proposals and giving out that money. So I simply read through it again as if I were going to be on that committee and ran into that snag, which was certainly unintentional.
Well, legal at some point could bring back their analysis I'm more interested in the analysis at this point as to what deficiencies Councilwoman Hiller has identified and possible amendments to that ordinance.
Okay.
Anything else to bring before the committee? Again, I want to thank the conferees for your attendance and for your testimony this evening. It's very helpful to the committee as we deliberate and make final recommendations to the city council. Unless there's further business to come before the committee, we are adjourned.